Welcome to the Teach Big podcast, where big energy, big ideas, and big results are just the beginning. I'm your host, Randi Whitney. Whether you're in year 1 or year 20, we are here to fuel your passion and help you teach big in every single way. That's right, B-I-G. Here, education is inspired, energy is required, and support for teachers is absolutely non-negotiable. I would greatly appreciate you liking, sharing, subscribing, all the things so that you can become a part of our Teach Big community. This episode gives a very unique comparison to the perspective between education in the 1980s and 1990s to now. I wonder how it's different. How will we know? How will we find out? Many of us who are in the classroom today were not in the classroom as the educator in the 1980s and 90s, but instead we were the students. So I have a very special guest here with me today. Please help me welcome Mike Fowler. He is a former high school teacher, a school principal, and associate superintendent for Pasadena ISD many years ago. So please help me welcome him. He's going to give us some great insight and perspective on what it was like then and maybe what it's like now. How are they alike? How are they different? And what can we learn from the comparison and contrast between the generations? Because you know they say if we don't know history, it's bound to repeat itself. So maybe we want it repeated, maybe we don't. Let's take a listen and help me welcome Mike Fowler. Welcome.
Thank you, glad to be here.
So, side note, Mike Fowler is not just all of the things that I listed, but he is also super special to my heart. He is my dad. So my husband and I, we have been together since we were 11. Oh, I know, let's hear the collective aww. And so my sweet husband was under the reign of my dad all through high school as his high school principal. So that's just a little fun side note to it all. But Mike, also dad, would you mind telling me about your experience in education? Give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Started in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Coached. Baseball, football, basketball, track. Loved the classroom. Would have never left the classroom. The opportunities hadn't been out there for more money. And I left a beautiful situation with kids. I spent a lot of time in the classroom with kids and enjoying what they had to offer me as well as what I had to offer for them. They were the reason that I was in the business. I loved kids, loved being around them, got energized by them, and couldn't wait every day to get with them again.
Well, and I happen to know that they loved you a lot too. I am, of course, Facebook friends with my dad, and therefore we share a lot of friends. And although I went to school in the same school where he was principal, the neat thing about it too is for 10, 20 years before that, even before I was in high school, I knew all the big high school kids because they were students of yours. And where the Facebook connection comes in is it's really neat to see and watch them still interact with you, joke around with you, ask for advice from you. I think that's really neat to watch those relationships. And I remember Dad came to me not too long ago and he said, oh my goodness, did you realize that Kevin and Travis are grandparents? And I was like, oh my goodness, they're supposed to be the really cool high school boys. And so, of course, I was the elementary school little kid at the time looking up to those guys. And so they worked for you in a capacity. You want to tell us a little about that?
As a side job, because teachers didn't make that much money in those days, I had several extra jobs. One was the textbook director, and I hired high school students, and I picked the good students in my class and interviewed them, and they're the ones that worked for me. I found that each year they wanted to come back and they wanted to work again for me, so I hired sophomores so that I could have them sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. I think what you want to know is how did they connect with me on Facebook, and the fact that today, even today, they contact me about what they're doing, where they are, and they miss those days when they worked for me. And we worked long hours, but had a lot of fun with it. And it's the kind of relationship that is once in a lifetime with many of them. And as you mentioned, they're grandparents.
Sure.
So that tells you my age, if you want to know that part of it. But to this day, they will call me, text me, Facebook me, and many of the students do that. And some of them are retired now, which is a little bit depressing, but I've enjoyed it all.
Well, and I think that relationship really does epitomize what I grew up to become and do, not just in the classroom, but beyond the classroom. And that is that you can know all the content in the world, you can even know how to put a lesson plan together, but if you're not building the relationships, those things kind of fall flat. And so the epitome of Teach Big, believe in the greatness of what you know, what you can deliver, but also how you're connecting. And I think that really does epitomize the true heart of Teach Big.
Well, I think that you have to find the strength. Whatever that kid had, everybody has a strength, and you have to discover it. It's the same with your teachers. When I was an administrator, you find the strength of that teacher and you value it and you help it to grow. And they understand it. Sometimes they don't admit it, but they actually understand that you drew from them the best that they had. Not everybody's perfect. Not every teacher's great, but you find the great part of that teacher, and that's how they pass that on to the student.
That makes a lot of sense. So I have a few questions that I'd like you to answer. And honestly, I want you to be honest because I think it would be kind of neat to take a look back. And so what were classrooms like in the 1980s compared to what you think they look like now? What are some really big differences?
Some big differences are when kids walked into the classroom, they were there with a joyful look on their face. They didn't have a cell phone in their pocket. And they were ready to be inspired in general terms. And you knew it, they knew it, and they couldn't wait to come in there. I had noticed in the 90s and in the 2000s as an administrator that smile wasn't on their face. I tried to help teachers to understand how to get that smile on their face. Mm-hmm. And they, as students, drifted away, in my view, of the fun times, enjoy the stories. I taught history, so they enjoyed the historical references, and I applied it to what was happening that day in the world somewhere. And today would be a perfect opportunity for a history teacher to jump on what's going on with foreign affairs. But now I feel like, and I've seen it, and I've raised children, and I have grandchildren, that school is an imposition in many places instead of a fun place to go. They don't bring that same zeal and enthusiasm. And it's a problem that I think can be solved. It just takes work on the administration and the teacher. And one of the things that I noticed is that teachers aren't getting the education that they need to apply to the classroom when they walk in there, especially if first-year teacher. I have a daughter-in-law who's a first-year teacher, and she went into that classroom with little or no understanding of what she was going to face. And I would resent, as a parent, a first-year teacher who knew nothing and they were experimenting on my kids. So I think the training that teachers get is most important. And when I was back in the Stone Age getting an education, we were taught things like, here's what's going to happen in your classroom. Past, take and roll. Here's the things that you can expect, and here's the way to deal with it. Now I think a lot of teachers, especially if they're alternative certification, are thrown to the wolves, and they don't get that opportunity. That's why teacher training programs are so important, helping them to understand, here's what you'll face, and here's how you deal with that. And a critical element of that, and it may be something you're wanting to talk about, is the parent.
I was going to ask that because I know that, of course, you are my dad, but if I got in trouble at school, my biggest problem was not the teacher or the principal or whoever got on to me. My biggest problem was you. When I came home, my biggest problem was not anyone in that school building. If I was corrected in any way, I knew. And I also knew if anyone ever had to say to me, do you need me to call your father? I'd be like, oh, no, 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 no. And that would be enough to change my behavior. Whereas now I have seen teachers, as I go around, of course, I was a public school teacher for many years, but now I travel around the country. I give seminars to teachers in language arts. And sometimes when we're doing classroom lessons and things like that, teachers will say, do I need to call your mother? Do I need to call your father? And I have literally heard kids say, yeah, go ahead. Like, oh my gosh. And even when I was in the classroom myself, and of course now that was 25 years ago, but that would not have happened. That would have been a really big problem. And so I think that is definitely something we need to research and we need to figure out. And I think too, you could be a teacher and you could discipline, you could correct, and it resonated. Now people are afraid to do that because parents, even in the preschool that I own, sometimes we tell your little child tripped this one. Well, what did the other child do? Wait a minute. I just told you your child tripped him. And so I feel like we live in a culture of let's blame the other people instead of turning the mirror on ourselves. And that's not every case. I have equally as many wonderful parents who believe exactly what we say, like, oh my goodness, I will take care of this. And they do. But I think proportionately speaking, do you think you're seeing those same trends that once in a while parent is now the more than once in a while parent?
The parental component is the big focal point for how you change kids and their behavior. If you don't involve the parents in not only their education, but the home portion of it, then you can't win the battle. I've had parents come into my office when I was an assistant principal. They wanted to know, what can they do to make Johnny better?
And I love it when we have those parents at the preschool. It changes everything.
I wish I could tell you the whole story of two twins that I had as an assistant principal who got in a fight with them, each other. And I called the father in. He came in and he didn't ask a whole lot of questions. He started taking off his belt. In my office as an assistant principal, he yanked his belt off and he was going to fix the business. All that to say, he didn't. Of course, I stopped him, but he was
willing,
using his devices to make the kid better. If that would have happened and those two kids were in my class or in my office now, I can see the parent coming in and wanting to know why we didn't take care of that and solve it ahead of time and make sure that their boys weren't fighting. Well, the parent has to help. If we don't have the parents, you can't teach them. And if you don't have assistance with the parents, when they go home, they come back at a stopped point. And you got to pick up from that point and move on with the next lesson. If you have the parents helping, whether it's just, what did you do in school today? What did you read about? What did you talk about? What video did you see? And then interacting with them, then you've got a situation that I think we're dealing with today.
Well, I had to go along with that. There was a little boy many years ago at Strawberry Fields, and we knew that if we ever reported to his daddy any little thing, that his daddy would take it seriously. Well, one day we had to tell his daddy what he had done. And so we did tell him, and he said, I will take care of this for you. And the little boy comes up front to meet his dad, and he said, not the rocks, not the rocks. I'm like, the rocks? What are you going to do with the rocks? And the dad, Johnny, looks at me and he said, well, I'll let you know, Randy, here's what I do with the boys if they get corrected. He said, my whole thing is you need to do something that they don't like to do that makes an impression. And he said, so I have a pile about 2 feet tall of about 1 to 2 inch gravel rocks in our backyard. And they're in a pile. And so if they get in trouble at school or in baseball or anywhere else, they have to go to the pile, and one by one, as fast or as slow as they want to run or walk, they have to move every rock to the other corner of the backyard. And he said, they get to eat dinner when that's done. And so they moved the rock. And the little boy was standing there saying, not the rocks, please, Daddy. He said, well, you hit your friend, so you're going to be moving the rocks. And going forward, that gave me a currency with that kid, because I could say to him, let's stop this action or that action. You don't want to do rocks, right? Like, oh yeah, I don't want to do rocks. Okay, great. And then his behavior would improve. And so that's an example. We had the parents backing us. They knew that we weren't doing anything crummy against any kid. We're for all kids. But the moving of the rock pile from one corner of the yard, I thought, wow, that's awesome. And he said, and I don't care how quickly they do it or how slow they do it, but they don't get dinner until it's done. And I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. In fact, both of those boys grew up to be scholar athletes. One of them is now married and on getting into the professional baseball minor league realm. And they were very disciplined, and they were very polite and wonderful, academically successful. And I do attribute that to the mom and dad and the stance that they took. And that started when they were 3 at the preschool.
That's impressive. Teaching is an art.
Absolutely.
Teaching, you don't memorize the way to teach and walk in there and apply that, because every day, all the things you have planned, you can throw most of them out the window. Things are going to change the moment you've taken the role. The colleges today, in my view, don't take that into consideration. They have a structure, and they think, here's what you're going to do, and here's how you're going to do it. It's not that way. 25 kids all have 25 different personalities. And if you think you can say one thing that 25 personalities understand, you've lost it. Mm-hmm. It does not work.
I think you tapped into something very imperative that I talk a lot about and teach big, and that is the one-on-one training. I know a lot of school districts have really good mentor programs and that type of thing. That's very important, hugely important. But I will say that one of the things I'm noticing when I travel around the country is teachers don't know their content like they used to know their content, and therefore they don't feel confident in what they know. And then beyond that, they're not sure how to deliver it, the craft. And therefore, because of those two things, it's like a domino effect. Now they've lost the ability to have that great relationship with kids, because I believe kids completely respect you when you know everything about your content there possibly is to know. They have this respect for you. Think, oh my goodness, he knows everything about history, or oh my goodness, she knows everything about writing. And so they grow that respect for you first. And so I think tapping into that parent piece is hugely important. I think tapping into, let's make sure that teachers aren't just expected to deliver a script and follow a curriculum, that although those things are necessary, and I understand their need in today's world and what the picture looks like, I get it. But I think that we need to show them how they can be themselves and show their personality through this check-off curriculum that we live in. And I think it's really important that we do that, because, in a whole different podcast, I go into what's making teachers leave the profession right now. And I don't think it has anything to do with pay, because they knew the pay before they signed up for the gig. So they knew that. They knew they were not going to be making $200,000 a year, clearly. But I think what they also thought they knew was that they would be making this huge difference. And I feel like they feel like they don't have that purpose. And I think part of that purpose comes from knowing your content inside and out. Where do we learn our content? Where do we learn that from? Used to, we were writing our own lesson plans, so it made us dive deeper. It made us research. And we live in a research easy world. everything's at our fingertips. There's no reason that we can't be experts in everything we need to teach. But yeah, so I'm really on the struggle bus with how do we help new teachers. I have a real heart for the novice teacher, and how can we help her or him know their content, know great techniques for delivery, and how to build healthy relationships with kids. So, yeah.
I think the buddy system with teachers is gone. Back in the day, we had a buddy system, and a fresh teacher was assigned with a seasoned teacher, and they observed on their off period that particular teacher teaching their subject. And come to find out, they started mimicking and doing the same things, which you hope for. But if you go into that classroom and you shut that door and you're expected to teach to a test that you're not sure about,
Sure.
then that's the grief. That testing and teaching to a test, when you haven't perfected what that
The content is to start with.
right.
Yeah.
And with the online classes that people take in college, they don't get that same feel for instructing somebody. So they've taken many hours of college classes, and then they walk into that door and they go blank. Past taking the role, what do? How do you teach someone who has never read a single word in their life how to read? You have to understand the end product. The end product, without an understanding or knowledge of it, you're never going to get there. And each of those children is so different and special that without the ability to understand where you're going to take them to, you can't take them on the trip.
Yeah, it's really tough. Really tough. Also tough is we're only on question 1.
Oh, well, fire away.
Okay. Oh goodness, this is probably going to open up a whole can of worms. How has student behavior and attention spans changed, from all those years ago to now? What is your view on that?
Sure. The attention span is it's a problem. You don't have buttons and bells and things going off in a little iPhone to keep their attention. You're teaching to that child a concept, but 20 other kids in there have to get that same concept, but you can't deliver it the same way for the need of Johnny and Susie and Billy. So you end up giving a general spin on that particular topic, and what happens is you've missed some kids. They did not grasp what you threw out there. Some of them did. Susie Smart on the front row got it right. She will memorize it. She will always know that fact. But Billy in the back, he may not. I was a Billy in the back, and I understood that.
So how do you think that leads into the student behavior piece of the puzzle?
Sure. The student behavior, if you don't get their attention in the way that they need to be attached, then they tune you out. Then once they tune you out, they're thinking about that fly that came in the room, or they're looking out the window at something that's going on, and they're not with you. So once you don't have them, they fester. They have a problem not listening to you, but listening to somebody else who's beside them, and then they're chatting, and your instruction is going out the window. The attention span, you've got to be able to get the attention of children in a multitude of ways that appeals to most of the kids. You'll never get them all, but to get most of them, you have to have a gift, and teaching conveys that gift. If you're there to teach and you haven't had enough valued experiences to teach, you've cheated the kids.
And so, of course, the question is, how do you get those valued experiences? And that's, obviously the first year I was a teacher versus the 10th year I was a teacher, I was a very different girl in the classroom, and I learned along the way. So that is definitely something that does come with time. But I think it also comes with a bit of we need to make sure that a lot of natural teachers are getting in there because I think some people just do have a natural gift for it. It makes sense to them.
Well, anecdotally, you are going to be a teacher because when I worked as principal of night school, which is different than what I did in the daytime, I took you to the classes.
I remember.
And I turned you loose in a classroom, and just so happens that you had a sister that you brought along, and you learned how to teach your sister for 3 or 4 hours while I was the principal of night school. So what happened is you demonstrated the ability to teach, which made your sister smarter, which made you learn how to deliver a concept, and we're now reaping the benefits.
Well, that's very kind. But yeah, I definitely remember those days, and I remember setting up my own little classroom. I remember in the house we had a hall closet, and I wanted a classroom really bad. And so you and Mom cleaned out the hall closet for me, bought me a chalkboard and all my stuffed animals and these little chairs. I don't know where y'all got them, but these little chairs. We lined up my stuffed animals. You gave me a chalkboard, lots of chalk, and my sister came in there, and I was able to teach everybody. I remember of course, I gave them grades. Of course, I gave them grades. I gave them conduct grades. I gave them content grades. But I remember even pretending that one of them would get sick and need to go to the nurse. And I remember putting headphones on my sister and you and Mom and doing a little hearing test. Like I was mimicking the hearing test. So you're definitely onto something. The mimicking thing is very, very important to have those good mentors, to have those role models. And we need to keep those wise teachers in our buildings as long as we can, because they are a wealth of information for the young guys coming up. And the young guys need those teachers to look up to. You know, just like kids need role models, new teachers need role models. And so I think that's a really...
Well, that goes with the mentoring thing that I was talking about. If you have kids that walk in that room and look at someone who's not seasoned and they haven't had a chance to learn how to deliver a concept, you've cheated them. On the other hand, if you have a teacher who's worked with a teacher and learned some of the basics of presenting information, you got a chance at teaching all of them.
So what tools do you think or resources have transformed, in your opinion, teaching since the 1980s? What have you seen come into play? And of course, the obvious is the technology piece and the cell phone. But have you seen other things as well as that come into play and transform teaching, maybe for good, maybe for not good?
Well, obviously, the cell phone has a lot to do with this. But when I was an assistant principal, we got televisions in every classroom, which was the first example that I had of technology assisting the teacher. I found that the teacher started to rely on the technology instead of their skill. And so students who they are programmed to watch TV, and they will watch TV, and they will absorb a lot. But if you use that as an assistant, instead of relying totally on the television or the cell phone or the computer, I find that to be a problem.
Got you. That makes sense. Definitely makes sense. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but how did the student-teacher relationship differ from then to now?
I think it's more sterile now. Back when I was teaching, you get attached to kids, and you're allowed to get attached to kids. And nowadays, I don't think that same feeling is out there, and teachers are scared. And so they don't put their arm around kids like you could in the day. They don't take them aside and say, why are you crying about this or that? Or you had a boyfriend, girlfriend issue, you could talk with them about it. It personalized them. You could personalize students, and they would personalize you, and they would come to rely on you. I think today, in today's schooling setting, the kid comes in, the teacher's there, yay, and then they walk out, and then they go to the next teacher who's in, and yay, and walk out. They don't have connections. There's no connectivity, which is disappointing.
Sure, of course. Of course. So I'm looking at the time and how far we've gone. So I think what we're going to do, if you don't mind, we're going to make a part 1 and part 2 out of this interview. Does that work for you?
Sure.
So what we'll do is we're going to cut out from you guys right now. This will be the end of part 1. And so I want to end this episode, and then we'll, if you don't mind hanging around for a little while, we'll start episode 2 and pick up where we left off. All right. Fantastic. Thanks for joining me today. If this message inspired you, share it with a colleague, but better yet, bring it back to your own classroom and start teaching with your whole heart. Start teaching big, B-I-G. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. And until next time, teach big, think big, and believe in the greatness that is already within you.